Managers of Reddit, what's the worst thing someone did to get fired? Buddy spilled booze all over their brand new laptop, came into my IT office hammered, and handed us a fried out laptop while still under the influence. He was a manager in another department. He was let go not long after that. But the worst thing I've seen people do and not get fired for were older receptionist ladies bullying a fellow receptionist into personally logging out of life. But that's a lot harder for HR to prove on who did what or when, since no official reports were made, but it was kind of a known in the office as to what exactly happened. I worked for a little dial-up ISP in the late 90s, and got an email from a 70-year-old woman one day complaining that someone had been sending her illicit minor content in email. Well, I went poking around and discovered another account that was one letter off of her name, that had the largest mailbox on the server by a mile. We're talking gigabytes when the average email list was only a few bytes of text at most. I had a sneaking suspicion, so I immediately archived this email's home directory, showed it to my boss, who also suspected the same thing I did, but he had the authority to open a customer's mailbox and see what was in there, where I didn't. Boy, do I wish we had not seen what we saw. Those images still haunt me 30 years later. Turns out, this guy had been acting as a clearinghouse for CSAM on our servers. You'd email him a few pics he didn't have in his collection, and he'd email you a few back that you hadn't seen yet. Boss called the FBI, explained everything to them exactly the way we found it, walked them through it, etc., up to opening the mailbox again. They wound up arresting like 30 people associated with this one email address. Fortunately, I didn't have to testify or anything. I mean, I would have done it, but only reluctantly. I had no desire to be in the same zip code as that dude, much less the same room. Was at a military sharp training in a joint assignment. The Army instructor was unavailable, so we borrowed a civilian Air Force instructor. About halfway through, the instructor essentially described R as surprise intercourse. Me, the male lieutenant colonel, turned to the female lieutenant colonel next to me and gave her a look of, "If you're not going to, I will." She gave me the nod, so I spoke up. R is an act of violence, not sex you didn't plan for. The instructor, who is female by the way, doubles down on it being surprise intercourse. Female lieutenant colonel comes off the third rope and lays into them. I honestly thought she was going to start beating up the instructor. At this point, other people are starting to murmur. From the back of the room, an Army one-star general stands up and says, "This training is over. Ma'am, please leave. Everyone else, stand fast." Instructor says something to the effect of, "She's not finished," to which one-star replies, "You are. Absolutely finished." We redid the training a month later, with the first 10 minutes being a detailed explanation of how we would never, ever see that other person again. Was part of a design team that remodeled and designed a casino. It was close to opening, so the casino team was moving the contents of an existing vault to the new vault. They would do this in big wheeled carts with a few casino management staff and armed security at all four corners. One of the tradesmen decided he'd pretend like he was robbing it as they moved it across the casino, pull his drill out to make it look like a gun. He was drawn on by at least two of the security guards with shotguns. The GC field superintendent told him to leave immediately. This was a union job, so he called his union rep. Once he arrived, the union rep watched the video and told him to get the fuck off the property. We still had lots to do before opening, but that guy was not going to be part of it. For a minute there, I thought you were going to say he was fired from life. Who the hell messes with armed security guards with bloody shotguns? Not me, but a friend of mine used to drive armored trucks that haul cash for banks. All the security guys are armed all the time at work. He said you would be amazed at the amount of people that do dumb stuff like this and think it's funny. Worst was probably someone at a work party drinking too much, causing some issues when her manager tried to take her keys, and then attempting to drive away before crashing into a parked car in the parking lot. Most egregious was that we used to have an unlimited paid time off policy, and a dude just left one day and never came back. It took about a month to fire him. My high school friend was a bar manager at Cheddar's. On his day off, he snuck in the back door through the fire exit into the kitchen with a 9mm handgun, which in reality was just an airsoft gun, trying to rob the restaurant. The cooks fucked him up and apprehended him until the cops arrived. He was bound with aprons, and the cooks laid into him. He ended up getting sentenced for 7 years, but just got out recently at the 5-year mark due to good behavior. Dude has always been weird. Hired a guy who we had interviewed virtually. Nice guy who had a great resume and credentials for the job. I was excited to have him join the team. He wound up being very productive, pleasant, and a great fit. I thought I knocked it out of the park with hiring him. My company moved back to a hybrid schedule for local employees at the time, and before I even got to the office, 7 people messaged me complaining about his body odor. When I arrived, I nearly fainted. I didn't know human beings could smell like that. Genuinely, one of the foulest smells that I've ever experienced. I brought him into my office and asked if something was going on or if maybe there was a medical situation that I needed to be aware of. He just assured me that he forgot to shower. I told him to go home and take care of it. He came back 2 days later and somehow smelled worse. This continued to happen for 3 weeks, and people were ready to riot. I had to temporarily move him to a back office because a pregnant employee got sick due to his body odor. I tried to get approval for him to work remotely, but our company CEO wouldn't approve it. After repeated warnings, I fired him. The security guard who escorted him out asked our office manager for a mask with an exhalation valve before walking him out. While he was right beside him, I managed to catch a glimpse of the guy, and the look of humiliation, shame, and embarrassment was rough. Really cool guy who was decent at his job, so I felt kind of bad. But my God, that shit was nasty. I was an assistant manager for a lawn and garden department in college, and we had to fire one of the seasonal girls because she would invite various love interests into the department on a 2 to 11 shift when no one was in the store after 8, to hook up in areas that didn't have cameras. Me and my buddy caught her out behind the store with some guy with his pants down where we stored extra racking. She begged not to be fired, but policy is policy. And she was awful anyways, so it was a relief to get rid of her. We also had a cashier get fired for moving a nested waterfowl, and was later arrested because she took the bird and the nest to her house. A guy at my work was fired after only 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, he did a lot of things to annoy people, repeatedly resulting in him being called into our boss's office to be told, don't do that. He was annoying and stressing our boss to constantly have to tell this guy not to do very obvious things. One day, my boss calls him into his office for another chat. My boss isn't sure if he's going to fire him yet, but is going to see how it goes. The guy starts off the conversation with, "Boss, you really need to relax." My boss said, "You're right. You're fired." The dude had unknowingly recommended his own termination. 2 weeks later, he came back to the office to try and convince our boss that he had made a mistake firing him. That did not go well. Painter for a church, fired for engaging in very public sex acts in the church parking lot during school lunch breaks so that he could have an audience, with someone on parole who wasn't supposed to contact him. He could have done it inside the church. There were couches, chairs, tables, pews, altars, which were more comfortable than tarmac in the midday sun. But he was a rebel. Not even in a car. That's certainly a choice. Yeah, he thought love should be proud in public. It was just very awkward. Not helped by his significant other, who was his assistant, taking issue with his public display of affection for another woman. Also, valuable learning lesson for the priest. Hiring cheaper help because they need the work and your support as you are godly Christians doesn't always work out. I knew a guy who stole iPhones from the warehouse we worked in, ran out of a meeting with management about it with a stolen phone in his pocket, jumped a barbed wire fence to escape, then filed a grievance for wrongful termination. We had a sales manager be drunk every day. We kept smelling the smell of booze, but thought maybe he was having a drink at lunch. Nope. Walked in one day as he was putting away an open bottle of something in his desk, wiping his mouth and slurring his words. He got the boot the next day. I was a senior director of IT for a publicly traded bank. I left to start my own company. Got a call 3 months in asking me to come back to physically help identify servers that were in a secure area. Weird, but okay. These are big machines though, about the size of dishwashers. Turns out, the new guy in charge took 2 servers home to use as gaming computers. At the time, in the late 1990s, each one of those computers cost $500,000. They were backups filled with account data and every type of a secure transaction log for the bank. Daily fed wires to checking account data, personal loans, you name it. He didn't even purge them. He just literally took them home in a truck, set them up in his living room, and was using them online for his gaming. When I got to the bank, I could not find the servers, and pulled the guy aside along with law enforcement, where he confessed. The Treasury Department, Secret Service, and the FBI went to his house and took the servers back. I've never seen or heard from him again. Alright, now we jump into the rapid fire segment of the video for stories too short to make a full entry out of, but too good to leave out. Let's hop in. I worked with a woman who got fired for making tiny calzones for the rats because she felt bad for starving them when we had to implement a super strict cleaning regimen and lock up all their food sources. Butcher's shop had a guy doing a carving station in back. Only job he had was to cut prime rib as it came in. But apparently, cutting his toenails was more important. He was relieved on the spot. It turned out arse on a photocopier was okay, but penis and balls were not. A woman stuck her hand into an active bread maker and almost lost a finger just because she wanted to be fired so she could collect unemployment. 2 people got fired for doing the nasty in the warehouse. Lots of cameras in that warehouse, so they couldn't deny it. Sent naked videos of herself eating cupcakes to a married coworker on Teams. At my buddy's job, an employee brought brownies to work for his birthday. They were pot brownies. Everyone was sent home at like 10 a.m., high as can be. Employee was fired on the spot. Worked at Jimmy John's for a while. This one dude put earwax in a customer's sandwich. Fortunately, the shift leader saw him do it so he could stop that sandwich from going out, but he got fired immediately. So guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did. I'm ReddList. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.